My daughter squeezed my hand at the hospital registration desk, smiled at the man standing beside her, and said, "Dad, this is the best decision I've ever made." Marcus Webb smiled back at her, the way a man smiles when he has practiced it. Warm, patient, perfectly timed. And something in the back of my mind, the part that spent 28 years with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit, went very, very quiet. I had learned to trust that quiet. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from today. Your city, your state. I love knowing who's in this community with me. And if stories like this one matter to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another one. A quick note, this story contains fictionalized elements shaped for reflection and entertainment, but everything it teaches you is worth holding on to. The morning light coming through the windows of Piedmont Regional Medical Center was the flat, colorless kind that makes hospital lobbies look the same at 7 in the morning as they do at midnight. My daughter Claire had been scheduled for a spinal procedure for 3 weeks. Routine, the surgeon had said, though I had learned over 63 years that surgeons use the word routine the way weather forecasters use the word partly cloudy. It covers a wide range of possibilities they would rather not enumerate. Claire was 41 years old. She had her mother's eyes and her mother's habit of tilting her head slightly to the left when she was working something out. She had my stubbornness and, thank God, my instinct for when something was wrong. She stood at the desk in a soft green cardigan, her dark hair pulled back, filling out pre-surgical paperwork with the focused efficiency of a woman who had been managing her own life capably since the age of 19. Marcus stood beside her with his hand on the small of her back. Marcus Webb was 44 years old. He had been in Claire's life for 17 months. He was tall, sandy-haired, with the kind of easy manner that made people feel immediately comfortable around him. He was a residential architect. He had a firm in Nashville, North Carolina, and a portfolio of beautiful mountain homes he had renovated for clients with significant disposable income. He spoke knowledgeably about wine and woodworking and local history. He called me Frank every single time he saw me, which was something I had never asked him to do and which I had told myself was simply the informal habit of a younger generation. I had told myself a great many things about Marcus Webb over 17 months. The paperwork was standard pre-surgical documentation. I had driven up from Greenville the night before, slept in the guest room of Claire's house, and spent the morning trying to be a useful presence rather than an anxious one. My wife Sandra had died 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 14 months from diagnosis to the morning. I sat in a chair beside her bed and held her hand while she stopped breathing. Since then, I had made it my work to show up for Claire in the ways I had not always managed when Sandra was here to cover for me. I was looking at the forms over Claire's shoulder when I saw the second page. It was a durable power of attorney addendum, medical and financial, pre-signed, already notarized. Claire's signature was at the bottom, and beside it, designated as primary agent and decision-maker in the event of incapacitation, was the name Marcus Allen Webb. I did not react. 28 years with the Bureau had given me that much the ability to absorb a shock without letting it reach my face. I kept my expression exactly where it was, pleasant, calm, a father at a hospital who was glad to be there. I tapped Claire's arm lightly. "Can I borrow that pen a second, sweetheart?" She handed it to me without looking up from her own form. I wrote nothing. I held the pen and looked at the document a moment longer, memorizing the name of the notary, the date, and the law firm letterhead printed at the top of the page. A firm called Hester and Lowry, with an address in downtown Nashville. Then I handed the pen back and said, "I'll go grab us some coffee from down the hall." In the corridor, I pulled out my phone and typed 3 things into my notes. Hester and Lowry, Asheville, Marcus Webb, POA. Then I walked back to the registration desk and smiled at my daughter and told her the coffee machine was out of order. And we laughed about hospital coffee together, and Marcus laughed with us, and I looked at his teeth. The procedure took 4 hours. I sat in the surgical waiting area with a magazine I did not read and a cup of coffee I did not drink, and I did what I had done for 28 years when something required my full attention. I thought slowly and methodically, and without alarm, because alarm is the enemy of clarity, and clarity was what Claire needed from me right now. The power of attorney document was dated 11 days ago. Claire had not mentioned it to me. That was unusual. She told me most things. We had grown considerably closer in the 3 years since Sandra died. the way parents and adult children sometimes do when the person who was the connective tissue between them is suddenly gone. Claire called me every Sunday evening. She sent me articles she thought I would find interesting. She had driven down to Greenville twice in the past year just to have dinner and watch baseball with me. She had not mentioned signing over decision-making authority over her finances and medical care to a man she had known for 17 months. I called Ray Dominguez at 9:47 from a quiet corner of the waiting room. Ray had been my partner for 11 of my 28 years at the Bureau. He was 61 years old, still working, still answering his phone on the second ring regardless of the hour. "I need a favor," I said. "Off the record for now. Tell me," he said. I could hear him already moving somewhere quieter. "I need you to look at a law firm, Hester and Lowry, Asheville, North Carolina. And I need a full background on a man named Marcus Allen Webb, same city, residential architect, age 44. A pause. "This about Claire?" "Yes. How fast do you need it?" "She's in surgery right now," I said. "So, I'll call you by 2, Ray said, and hung up. The surgeon came to the waiting room at 1:15. "Procedure went well," she said. Claire was in recovery. She would be discharged tomorrow if the overnight observation was uncomplicated. I thanked her and sat back down and waited. Marcus sat across from me in the waiting area for 4 hours and checked his phone 17 times. I counted. Ray called at 2:03. "I need you to listen to all of it before you say anything," he said, "because some of it is going to make you want to stop me in the middle." "Go ahead," I said. Marcus Allen Webb, born in Knoxville in 1980. Architecture degree from UT, licensed in North Carolina since 2009. The firm is real, the portfolio is real, the clients are real. Clean on paper back to 2012. A pause. Before 2012 is different. He had a business partner named Dennis Cord. They ran a property development company in Nashville called Whitfield Development Group. In 2011, Whitfield collapsed. 17 investors lost a combined total of about $2.4 million. The Tennessee AG investigated. The finding was civil, not criminal mismanagement rather than fraud, technically, but 3 of the investors filed separate civil suits. All 3 settled quietly. Cord took the primary liability. Webb was listed as secondary. His exposure was minimal because his name was on very little of the actual paperwork. I stood up and walked further toward the corner, my back to the room. "His name was on very little of the paperwork," I said. "Right," Ray said, which is an interesting detail for a licensed architect who was supposedly co-running the company. "And Hester and Lowry?" Ray exhaled. "That's the part I want you to hold on to. Hester and Lowry was incorporated 14 months ago in North Carolina. Before that, it existed in South Carolina under the name Lowry Legal Services. Sole practitioner, a woman named Gail Lowry. She's a notary and a paralegal, not a licensed attorney. She's been disciplined twice by the South Carolina Secretary of State's office for practicing law without a license. The firm name changed, and the address moved to Asheville approximately 2 months after Marcus Webb moved to Asheville. I stood very still. Outside the window, the afternoon had gone overcast, the sky low and gray over the parking structure. "Ray," I said, "how long has Marcus Webb been in Asheville?" 17 months, Ray said. I pressed my thumb against the bridge of my nose and breathed once, slowly, the way I had learned to breathe in rooms where I needed to keep my face completely neutral regardless of what my chest was doing. "One more thing," Ray said, and his voice dropped the fraction it drops when what he is about to say is the piece that connects everything else. "Claire's address. The house on Ridgemont Lane. She bought it in 2019. I pulled the county property records. 3 weeks ago, a lien inquiry was filed against the property. The filing agent of record is Hester and Lowry." I lowered the phone for a moment. Through the window of Claire's recovery room, I could see her sleeping, her face turned slightly to the side, the monitors beside her, calm and steady. I put the phone back to my ear. "Keep pulling," I said. "Everything you can find on the connection between Webb and Lowry. I need to know when they met and how long this has been running." "Already on it," Ray said. "Frank, don't confront him tonight." "I know how this works," I said. "I know you do," he said. "I'm saying it anyway." I put the phone in my pocket and went to find my daughter. Claire was awake by 3:30, groggy and pale, and trying to make a joke about the ceiling tiles, which was so precisely what Sandra would have done in the same situation that it stopped my breath for a second. I sat beside her bed and held her hand and listened to her talk about how strange anesthesia felt on the way out, and I watched Marcus stand at the foot of the bed with his hands in his pockets, and I kept my face exactly where I needed it to be. At 4 o'clock, a nurse came to check Claire's vitals, and Marcus stepped into the hallway to take a call. I watched him through the window in the door. His back was turned. His free hand was pressed flat against the wall beside the elevator. He spoke for 6 minutes. When he came back in, he said his office had called about a client issue. Claire said not to worry about it. He squeezed her foot through the blanket and smiled. I excused myself to use the restroom down the hall. In the corridor, I pulled up the notes on my phone and added 2 lines. 6-minute call, 4:07 p.m. Check who he called. Then I texted Ray. Can you pull Webb's call records from this afternoon? Looking for a call around 4 p.m. Ray texted back 4 minutes later. Already requested. Give me until morning. I drove to Claire's house that evening and sat at her kitchen table with a glass of water and thought. The house on Ridgemont Lane was a 1940s craftsman that Claire had spent 2 years restoring. It had original hardwood floors and a deep front porch, and a garden Sandra had spent a weekend helping Claire plan the spring before her diagnosis. It was worth considerably more than Claire had paid for it in 2019 because of the work she had put into it, and because of what Asheville real estate had done in the intervening years. Sandra had been meticulous about estate planning. She had a sister who was an estate attorney in Charlotte, and the two of them had spent 6 months after my retirement making sure everything was orderly and protected. Claire's house, my pension, the investment accounts, the beach property we had owned in Pawleys Island for 20 years. All of it was documented and structured. Everything was in order. Unless someone had begun quietly inserting their name into that order 11 days ago, I pulled out a yellow legal pad from the drawer where Claire kept pens and paper and wrote 4 things. Power of attorney, dated 11 days ago. What did Claire know about what she was signing? Hester and Lowry, Gail Lowry, paralegal, unlicensed, connection to Webb, how long, how deep, the lien inquiry on Ridgemont Lane. What is the mechanism? What is the timeline? Dennis Cord, Nashville, Whitfield Development. Who absorbed the liability and why? I drew a line between Webb's name and Lowry's. 17 months in Asheville. 14 months since the firm moved to Asheville. 2 months between his arrival and hers. He didn't find Gail Lowry in Asheville, I wrote. He brought her with him. I sat in my daughter's kitchen until midnight. Then I went to the guest room and lay on my back in the dark and ran through it again, methodically, the way I had spent 28 years running through things in the dark, and I did not sleep for more than an hour. Ray called at 7:15 the next morning. I was already at the kitchen table with coffee. The call Webb made yesterday afternoon, he said. Registered to a prepaid carrier. No contract name. A pause. But I ran the number through a contact at the carrier. The account was activated 14 months ago. Same month, Hester and Lowry filed its articles of incorporation in North Carolina. Same month. I set my coffee down carefully. And Dennis Cord, Ray continued. Your instinct was right. Cord did not take the liability in Nashville because he was the more culpable party. Cord took it because Webb had something on him. I found a deposition from one of the civil suits. Cord's own attorney, on record, said his client felt he had no choice but to assume primary responsibility due to pressure from his co-principal. A pause. The attorney used the word pressure. That was the word in the court document. Marcus found someone he could use, I said. That's how it reads, Ray said. He found someone he could put in front of the liability. Cord was the face. Webb was behind him. When it collapsed, Cord absorbed it, and Webb walked away clean enough to get licensed in a new state and start over. I looked at the yellow legal pad, the lines connecting the names. And Gail Lowry is his Cord, I said. She's the face on the legal paperwork. If anything goes wrong, she absorbs it. Her name is on the firm. Her notary stamp is on that power of attorney document. Webb's name is not on anything. Not on anything I can find, Ray said. Which is the pattern. I stood up and walked to the kitchen window. Claire's garden was still and frost-edged in the morning light. The rosemary Sandra had helped her plant now grown into a low, dense hedge along the path. The beach property, I said. Pawleys Island. It's held jointly between me and Claire. Has been since Sandra died. Ray was quiet for a moment. I'll pull the Horry County records this morning, he said. Pull them now, I said. Please. 20 minutes later, Ray called back. His voice was careful in the specific way it gets when he is delivering something he wishes he did not have to deliver. A title search inquiry was filed on the Pawleys Island property, he said. 6 weeks ago. Filing agent is Hester and Lowry. 6 weeks ago, Claire and I had spent a long weekend at Pawleys Island together. We had eaten crabs on the porch and watched the pelicans and talked about Sandra. Marcus had not come. Claire had said he was working on a project. I had been glad to have her to myself for 3 days. I thought about that weekend now, with a clarity that made my jaw tighten until I could feel the pressure running up into my temples. He had known we would be there. He had used those 3 days, while we were away, to file an inquiry on the property. He had been using everything, every dinner, every Sunday phone call Claire had ever mentioned, every detail she had shared with him about the family. He had been doing research with it, filing it, building towards something. I set the phone down on the table and pressed both hands flat on the wood and breathed once, very deliberately. Then I picked it up again. Ray, I said. I need to call Sandra's sister. Margaret Chen had been practicing estate and probate law in Charlotte for 22 years. She had helped Sandra and me structure everything. She answered on the second ring and listened without interrupting while I laid out everything Ray had found. When I finished, she was quiet for 4 seconds, exactly the length of silence that precedes a lawyer saying something she needs to choose precisely. Frank, she said, the power of attorney document, depending on how it's written, could give Marcus Webb the authority to make financial decisions on Claire's behalf during any period of incapacitation. That includes signing documents. That includes authorizing transfers. What kind of transfers? Property, investment accounts. If the document is broad enough and Claire is incapacitated long enough, even for a routine surgical recovery, he could initiate movement of assets and they would carry her legal authority. The kitchen was very quiet around me. Outside, a cardinal landed on the edge of the garden and was gone. How quickly can you file a challenge to the document? I said. If we can establish that the notarization was performed by someone not licensed to practice law in North Carolina, the document may be invalid on its face. I can file a motion in Buncombe County today. A pause. But Frank, Claire has to know. She has to be part of this. I know, I said. I'm going to tell her this morning. I drove to the hospital. Claire was sitting up in bed eating breakfast, color back in her face, looking more like herself. Marcus was not there. The nurse told me he had gone to get coffee from the shop across the street. I had exactly the amount of time I needed. I sat in the chair beside her bed and I told her everything. I did not cushion it. I did not frame it as a suspicion. I laid out what Ray had found, what Margaret had said, what the timing meant, what the pattern looked like across Nashville and Asheville, and 2 simultaneous title inquiries on properties she and I owned together. I spoke steadily and quietly, and I watched my daughter's face while I talked. She listened the way I had taught her, without interrupting, which was something I had not known I had taught her until this moment. Her face went through several things as I spoke. Disbelief, then the particular stillness of someone running the dates against their own memory, then something that was not quite grief and not quite anger, but lived in the neighborhood of both. When I finished, she sat for a moment with her hands flat on the blanket. The power of attorney, she said. Her voice was even. He helped me draft it. He said it was standard pre-surgical paperwork that the hospital recommended. He said his cousin worked in healthcare administration and told him it was something everyone should have going into a procedure. She looked at me. I didn't read it carefully enough. I just signed it. She said it without self-accusation, just as a fact. The fact of a woman who had trusted someone and was now sitting with what that had cost her. He found a good moment, I said. That's what they do, sweetheart. They find the moment when you're anxious about something else. She looked at the window. Her jaw was doing the same thing Sandra's used to do when she was processing something painful and refusing to let it crack her open in front of anyone who wasn't ready to witness it. Controlled, private, fierce in a quiet way. How long has he been planning this? She asked. I don't know the full timeline yet, I said. But the firm moved to Asheville 2 months after he arrived here. So at minimum, He came with a plan already in motion. She turned back to look at me, and her eyes were dry and very clear. What do I need to do? I told her. Margaret was filing the challenge to the POA today. Ray was continuing to pull Webb's financial history. What Claire needed to do was say nothing to Marcus. Go home when she was discharged, act like everything was normal for as long as it needed to be. She almost smiled. You're going to tell me I need to be an actress for a few days. I'm going to tell you that you are your mother's daughter, I said. And your mother was the most composed person I ever knew when something mattered. Something moved across her face that she let me see, just for a second. Then she straightened against the pillow and said, "Okay, tell me the rest." Marcus came back with coffee 20 minutes later. He set a cup on the bedside table for Claire, asked how she was feeling, told her she looked better, and kissed her on the forehead. I watched his hands when he did it, practiced and warm, the particular warmth of someone who has learned exactly how warmth should look from the outside. I shook his hand when I left and told him I was grateful he had been here for Claire, and I meant neither word of it, and my face gave him nothing. Ray called me at 6 that evening from my car in the hospital parking structure. I found Gail Lowry's financial records, he said, or at least the edge of them. She has an LLC registered in Delaware, standard shell structure, two-step ownership, connects to a holding company in Georgia. A pause. The holding company has one other registered owner, a man named Preston Dale, 63 years old, Atlanta, Georgia, former commercial real estate developer. I went still. Frank, Ray said. Preston Dale filed for bankruptcy in 2017. He lost everything, his development company, his properties, his personal assets. The trustee who managed the liquidation and coordinated with the federal investigation was a pause that lasted exactly the right length of time. An FBI financial crimes agent named Frank Heller. The parking structure was completely silent around me. Fluorescent lights, the sound of a distant elevator. Preston Dale blamed me, I said. I pulled the bankruptcy court transcripts, Ray said. He made a statement at the final hearing. He said your investigation was personal, that you had exceeded your mandate, that you destroyed a legitimate business over a procedural argument and he would not forget it. I looked at the steering wheel. My hands, 63 years old, the knuckles a little larger, a scar on the right thumb from a fence gate at Sandra's parents' property 20 years ago. Sandra had bandaged it at the kitchen table, told me I was careless, done it with more care than the cut required. He funded it, I said. Dale funded the whole operation. The Georgia Holding Company has been making payments to Lowry's LLC for 19 months, Ray said. Regular intervals. Starting 2 months before Marcus Webb arrived in Nashville. 19 months. 2 months before Marcus arrived. Webb had not come to Asheville and then built a plan. He had been recruited, funded, aimed. At my daughter's house, her beach property, the thing Sandra and I had spent a lifetime building and had left to her when Sandra died. Because that was what you did. You left the things that mattered to the people who mattered. And someone who had sat in a courtroom in Atlanta 7 years ago and watched me present the evidence that ended his company had decided to take all of it back. Not from me, from Claire. That was the part that moved through me like something cold and final. He had not come after my pension or my accounts or the Pawleys Island property in my name alone. He had come after Claire, because he knew he had done the research, the same way Gail Lowry had done the research that the thing most likely to destroy a man who had spent his whole career building walls was to go through the door he had left open. I had been the best FBI agent I knew how to be, and a very imperfect father. And Preston Dale had calculated both of those things with precision. Ray, I said. My voice came out steady. I need the fraud division. Already drafted the referral, Ray said. I'm waiting for your word. Send it, I said. Margaret filed the POA challenge in Buncombe County at 9 the next morning. At 9:14, the bank holding Claire's accounts received a fraud advisory from Margaret's office flagging any initiated transactions pending review. At 9:41, Ray's contact at the carrier confirmed that the prepaid number Webb had called from the hospital was the same number that had received 3 payments from the Delaware LLC in the past 6 months. At 10:15, Claire texted me from the house on Ridgemont Lane. He just asked me about the Pawleys Island property, asked if we'd ever thought about selling it. Said the market is good right now. I texted back. Say you'd have to talk to me about it. Be vague, she replied. Already did. He seemed frustrated. Good, I texted. Hold on. Ray called me at 10:52. The fraud division wants to move today, he said. They have the payment chain, the shell structure, the POA document, Lowry's disciplinary record, and the connection to Dale, the U.S. attorney in Charlotte has been briefed. A pause. Frank, this crosses into federal wire fraud because of the interstate shell company structure. This is ours. Lowry, I said. She's the weakest point in the structure, Ray said. The fraud division reached out to her attorney an hour ago. Unofficial. The attorney called back in 20 minutes. Ray's voice shifted the particular tone of someone delivering unexpected news. She wants to cooperate. I sat down on the edge of the guest bed in Claire's house. Through the wall I could hear Marcus in the kitchen, the sound of cabinet doors. Ordinary morning sounds that had nothing ordinary beneath them. She's scared of him, I said. Seems that way, Ray said. Her attorney says Dale and Webb have been pressuring her to move the timeline up. She's been stalling. She's the one whose name is on everything, and she knows it. I looked at the yellow legal pad on the nightstand, the names and the lines connecting them. A 44-year-old architect who had learned in Nashville how to put someone else in front of the paperwork. A paralegal whose name was on every document while his name appeared on none. A 63-year-old man in Atlanta who had sat in a courtroom and decided the best revenge was the kind that came through an innocent woman who had nothing to do with any of it. Both things could be true. Webb had used Gail Lowry the same way he had used Dennis Cord in Nashville, found her vulnerability, made her useful, positioned himself behind her. That did not make what she had done acceptable, but it was a crack, and cracks were what you built a case through. Tell the fraud division, I said, that I want them to move on Webb today, and I want Lowry's cooperation documented before he has any chance to contact her. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, Marcus Webb was detained at his architectural firm on Lexington Avenue in Asheville. Gail Lowry met voluntarily with federal investigators at the U.S. Attorney's office in Charlotte and provided a full account of the structure, the Delaware LLC, the Georgia payments, Preston Dale's role as the funding source, and the original Nashville connection that had introduced her to Webb 4 years earlier. By 4 o'clock, a warrant had been issued for Preston Dale in Atlanta. Ray texted me one line. Dale was home. He did not see it coming. I was standing at Claire's kitchen window when I got that message, looking out at the garden, the rosemary hedge, the pale November light flat across the path. I called Claire into the kitchen and told her it was done. She stood across the table from me and held the counter with both hands and breathed out once, slow, all the way to the bottom of her lungs. Then she looked at the table, then at me. He asked me what Mom was like, she said. 3 months ago, we were having dinner and he asked me how she used to make me feel safe, what she did. She looked up. I told him everything. I told him about Sunday dinners and the way she always left the kitchen light on when I came home late and how she knew when something was wrong before I said a word. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were very bright. I don't know how much of that was him learning the script and how much was just a person asking. I did not have a clean answer for her. The evidence, said Marcus Webb, had been planned and deliberate from the beginning. The evidence also said he was a human being who had sat across a table from my daughter and heard about her mother's kitchen light and filed it somewhere. Both of those things were true, and neither of them changed what he had tried to do. You'll carry the question, I said, for a while. That's honest. She nodded. Her jaw was Sandra's jaw, set and clear. I know. You did everything right, I said. When it mattered, you listened. You trusted the right person. I trusted you, she said. It was not a complicated thing the way she said it. Just true. A daughter saying a thing that was simply true. My throat closed around whatever I was going to say next, and I let it. I crossed the kitchen and put my arms around her the way I had not done enough when she was small, and growing up with a father whose mind was frequently somewhere cases required it to be. She leaned into it and I held on. We stood in Sandra's daughter's kitchen in the late November afternoon, and outside the garden was cold and still, and the rosemary Sandra had helped her plant was dark and fragrant against the frost. I found a cemetery outside Greenville 3 weeks later, on a Saturday morning when the December sky was the particular clear, hard blue that only comes after a cold front has swept everything clean. Claire drove down and met me there. We stood at Sandra's headstone together, our breath making small clouds in the cold air. The stone had Sandra's name and the years and a line from a hymn she had loved since childhood. The line said, "I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me." She had chosen it herself, the way she had chosen most things, quietly, without making a project of it, with the serenity of a woman who had always known exactly who she was. Claire put her hand on the stone, the cold granite under her palm. She stood there for a long moment without saying anything, which was right, because some moments do not require words. Then she said, "She knew about people, didn't she?" "She always knew." "Before I did," I said. "Every time." Claire smiled. "A real one. The kind that came from somewhere deep and private. She told me once, when I was about 16, she said, 'Claire, a man who makes everything feel easy right away is a man who has practiced making things feel easy. Give it time. The real ones get easier gradually.'" She looked at me. I forgot that. I let myself forget it. "You remembered it when it counted," I said. She took my hand. We stood there while the December light moved slowly across the hillside. "There is something I want to say to every father or mother listening to this today. You will not be there for every moment. You will miss things. You will be in another room, another city, another chapter of your own life, and your children will be living theirs. And that is how it is supposed to be. But the moments that matter are not the ordinary ones. The moments that matter are the ones where everything that was hidden comes suddenly into the light, and the person your children need in that moment is you. Be that person. Build that trust before the crisis arrives. Answer the phone. Show up for the ordinary dinners. Let your children know that when they need to reach you on a Sunday morning, at a hospital desk, in the middle of a life that has just revealed a danger they did not see coming, you will be there, paying attention. I spent 28 years protecting people I did not know from threats. I spent my career learning to recognize. The most important protection I ever gave was to a woman in a hospital room in Nashville, North Carolina, on a Tuesday morning, with a legal pad and 28 years of knowing what to look for, and a daughter who, when I sat down beside her and told her what I had found, looked at me and said simply, "Okay, tell me the rest." That was everything. That was the whole of it. If this story stayed with you today, leave a comment below. Tell me what it meant to you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you never miss another story from this community. These stories carry fictionalized elements, built for reflection and for the people who need them. If this is not for you, step away freely and find what serves you better. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end, friends.